Are you lost in the doom scroll, living vicariously through other people's adventures while you're stuck in the same town you've always known? Do you get up every morning already bored to death of what your locale has to offer? Every time you travel, whether it's a weekend away or a formal holiday overseas, do you catch yourself wondering what life would be like if you just stayed where you are? Walking those unfamiliar streets, sitting in new cafes, you imagine a different version of yourself living there, someone freer, someone who chose their life instead of inheriting it. Maybe you've been called selfish for wanting more. I know I have. Ungrateful for craving different and wanting separation from certain people. I've also had this one called out on me too. Maybe you're delusional for thinking there's a life that fits you better somewhere else. You, like your birth town, but sometimes love feels like slowly suffocating. If you've ever stood at the edge of your town limits and felt your chest tighten with equal parts of fear and longing, if you've ever wondered where staying safe means staying stuck, if you've ever felt guilty for wanting to leave the people in the place that made you, this episode is for you. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your hometown is to leave it, and sometimes the only way to find yourself is to lose everything familiar first. This podcast is being recorded on Gubby Gubby land. We pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, our country, and elders past and present. I'm back. I am Cait Muir, and I'm the host of Tell Me About It podcast. And today's episode is a solo ep, and it is about why your hometown might actually be your comfort zone prison. So in 2020, I packed my life up in regional Victoria, where I'd spent on and off 31 years. I owned multiple brick and mortar businesses. I was inducted into the Chamber of Commerce. I knew every street corner. I had a great big established friend circle. And I moved to the Sunshine Coast where I knew exactly nobody, not a single soul. 6 months in, homesick and questioning everything, I pretty much nearly went back. But I learned that staying in the discomfort was probably the most important thing I've ever done. And I believe that everybody should experience what that feels like at least once in their life. If not forever, at least for a little bit. And I want to be clear on something too. Not everybody needs to leave their birth town. Some people genuinely thrive where they planted their first roots. They build beautiful lives, meaningful careers, deep connections right where they started, and they wake up grateful for familiar streets and generational friendships. Their hometown isn't a cage, it's a garden where they bloom perfectly. And that's beautiful. And I love that if that's you. I truly, truly do. And this episode isn't about convincing those people that they're wrong. It's not about suggesting that staying home means staying small or anything of the sort, or that everybody who remains in their birthplace is somehow missing out. Some of my friends have created lives that are expansive, adventurous, fully realized. They travel, they grow, they challenge themselves, and they just happen to do it in the same home base that never changed. And I fucking love that. But that wasn't my story. And I know I'm not alone. I have lots of people in my life that can relate to me on this too. And this episode is for those of you who feel like a move might be on the cards. Maybe you've already moved and you might just need some support. And I love that. Your birth town might be perfect for you, but if you're listening to this with a knot in your stomach, remembering all the times that you've stood at the edge of your town wondering what's beyond it, this is my permission slip to you. This is me validating you. This is me showing you what it can be like for some other people, because I definitely have felt that too. And I honestly believe too that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a place is leave it, and sometimes the only way to appreciate where you're from is to see it from somewhere else. So this is just one story. This is mine. Take what serves you, leave what doesn't. But whatever you do, don't let anybody else decide whether you're staying or leaving is right for you. That's your choice. It's yours alone. You should do it without influence. You should do it without anybody else getting in your bloody ear about it. So growing up in regional Victoria, I didn't really realize I was living in a bit of a bubble. I picture that Simpsons movie where they live in the big glass dome. And I didn't really realize it was like that until I started popping it. I'd spent my entire life living in one place, bar a very short stint in Melbourne. And it really does kind of blind you that you don't see the walls. You just feel like the walls are the edges of the world. Your normal becomes the normal, and your community's way of thinking becomes the only logical way to think. I think anyone from a small town can tell you that the tall poppy syndrome is real. A little bit of the small town delusion-y gossip is real. I nearly left my birth town in 2009. I was 19 years old. Back then, if you are from Victoria or the Gold Coast, you probably remember there was $99 flights with Jetstar and then $1 return flight. So you could go between Melbourne and the Gold Coast for $100. And every few weeks, sometimes multiple weekends in a row, we used to fly up to the Gold Coast after work on a Saturday, fly back Monday night or Tuesday night, depending on what our work and uni rosters were. You know, young, energetic, fit, hot people tings. And we went and visited friends who lived up there. And I even had a bar job up there sometimes. And I was so close to pulling the pin and moving. And instead, I bought a brick and mortar business that demanded every ounce of my intention. And, the universe had other plans apparently. And I believe in divine timing. I believe in trusting the universe. And even inadvertently back then when I was still trying to work out who I was and I had no fucking idea about myself or who I was or what I really wanted, I just trusted the universe and my intuition was always calling me and guiding me. And for whatever reason, I listened. And I look back on that decision now to stay rather than to go, because I did have some friends. I should have added that. I did have some of my friends did actually end up moving. And I look back and I'm stoked I made that decision because my businesses have provided me everything that I have now and a lot of the opportunities that I have now. And I really do sometimes ponder and think like, what would my life have turned out like if I had have stayed then or if I had have moved back then instead of going this way? Like, would I have the same things? Would I be in the same place? Would I have moved back to my birth town? Like, what would have happened? And for another 11 years, I stayed put, building multiple businesses, living the life in the place I thought I was supposed to live in forever. And throughout those 11 years, I traveled really, really well. I'm really grateful for the amount of travel that I did. And not just like Bali and Thailand and the atypical Aussie hotspots, but like real weird places. I've spent a lot of time around like small little Philippine islands and like little Indonesian islands that don't even have Wi-Fi. I've even been to places like Borneo and Samoa, and I spent months traveling around Mexico and in the US. And a lot of this travel I did solo as well. So make no mistake, even though I didn't move, I have moved around a lot and I've seen a lot of the world, and I'm grateful for all of that too. And I don't think if I hadn't have had my businesses, I don't think I would have been financially able to do some of the things that I was able to do. So the restraints of business really did mean like the longest trips I could have. I think the longest one was 4 months at a time. Probably a good thing because I probably would have never come home. But it also, like I said, provided for me financially. So I really, really love that. And maybe a bit of a controversial opinion, and this could be me just validating my 20-something-year-old self and even potentially my future kids, but forget saving for a house deposit in your 20s. Spend it living, spend it doing, spend it building your businesses, and spend it growing as a person and seeing the world and just fucking living. I hope I have really, really adventurous kids that just want to go and like live their lives and travel and see the world and do all the incredible things. I really do think everybody should travel extensively and uncomfortably and just get lost in places where you can't even read the street signs, eat food you can't pronounce. I've eaten crickets. It's probably the weirdest thing I've ever eaten. Obviously, I've eaten things like escargot, although I ate that in Australia. But probably the weirdest thing I ever ate on my travels was crickets, and we had them on lemongrass sticks, and they were actually really good, and I 10 out of 10 would eat them again. But I also think like part of the fun of traveling is like getting lost in weird transport systems and kind of losing your way, but ending up somewhere else really, really amazing. I love that. Those weird, wonderful, off the beaten track places taught me lots of things. And that is mostly like there are 1,000 different ways to live a life. And the one you grew up with is just one option on an infinite menu. But there is so much more of the world out there, you know. And when you travel long term, not just a week to a town 2 hours from you, but really like immerse yourself somewhere foreign, you start to see your hometown's quirks for what they are. Choices, not universal truths. The way people interact, what they value, what successful looks like, how families operate, and that it's kind of like all up for negotiation. Like there's no rules and there's no forcing anyone to do anything. And look, another thing I should add on there actually is see your country. Australia is fucking amazing. If you are Australian and you have never been into the outback, go. It's unfucking real. There's so many incredible places in Australia. So I really don't think that anyone needs to just travel overseas. I think there's so many places in our country that we could see too. And, you know, being in my new home state of Queensland, I don't think you realize how big Queensland is until you actually live in this state. I think you could fit probably 10 Victorias inside Queensland, and that's quite hard to fathom. So yeah, get out and see your country too. Get out and see where you live. It's hilarious to me when I go somewhere, travel somewhere, and some people haven't even been to some of the touristy spots. Crazy. Anyway, back on track. So 2009, I nearly moved, but didn't end up buying businesses. By 2020, I'd built a coaching business, my coaching business, Iconic Coaching. Back then, it was in a commercial office, but we had built it in the way that it could be completely remote alongside my physical business back then, which was a barbershop. I had sold, obviously, the original salon that I owned that kept me in Victoria originally. I felt that I finally had the freedom. My barbershop was fully managed. I never worked in my barbershop on the floor, just ran it remotely. So I finally felt like I had the freedom. It's 2020. I've been sitting on this decision for, 10 to 15 years. All sorts of things held me back, and I made all sorts of excuses not to go. And I got to this point in my life where I'm 30. I finally got the freedom to do whatever I want. And I don't know if anyone tells you this, but freedom's actually really fucking terrifying when you have to use it. Like, pulling the actual trigger and making the decision and just doing is so effing scary. It's terrifying, but you have to do scary things to be able to grow. So we get to 2020. January 2020, I pack my whole house. I'm ready to go. I have my birthdays in January. I always do something fun for my birthday. And I start packing up my whole house. I'm getting really excited. In February 2020, my commercial lease for my coaching business ended, which was awesome. Perfect timing. Another excuse to get out. I don't have to pay out any lease or anything like that. March 2020, I was renting a townhouse, and that lease was about to end as well. So it finished like the last week of March 2020. And then April 2020, the whole state locked down. Half the country was locked down. It was just the fucking weirdest year of all time. And I think that anybody who lived through a serious lockdown like Victoria had could tell you how strange it was. And when you're living alone and, nobody can go anywhere and you can't leave the house. And, there was a stage there where we couldn't really even walk our dogs. I had a beautiful Rottweiler named Jed, and it was just me and him for a long time. It was wild. So yeah, all my plans to move, I was going to, slowly drive up the coastline from Victoria to Queensland in March. It absolutely didn't happen. So things are ramping up in March. And I thought, I might extend my lease for a month or two to see how things go. I don't really want to move around. No one really knew what was going on. And then, April came, and that was a huge, big stomp in my problems. But we lived through that. September rolls around. I had my dream holiday booked, which was I was booked myself first class flights. I was going to Egypt, Morocco, Dubai, and Jordan. And I was so fucking excited. And I was going on my own for 8 weeks. And I'd always wanted to go to that part of the world, and I'd never done it. And I couldn't go. Like, life was telling me that was just not meant for me at that time. So instead, I went to the Gold Coast and to the Sunshine Coast, and I did that so that I could explore and I guess kind of get a feel or a grasp for where I wanted to live and where I wanted to kind of set myself up permanently. And then I came back and I was like, this is great. I'm going to come back. Once again, my lease was about to end because I added 6 months back in March. And what do you know? We get locked down again. From about October, things started to lighten up a little bit, and I guess the lockdown started to loosen and we started getting some grip on life back. But in November of 2020, my dog died, and he was the first love of my life. He was the most amazing dog ever, and I think anyone who's had a pet as an adult, it was like their first pet. It's just like this life-changing thing. So Jed passed away. He had cancer. He died very quickly. As well as that, my endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome had expanded and gotten far worse than I'd ever thought in my whole life. I ended up having cysts and endometriosis all through my bladder and my urethra, and I had massive surgery, and it was disgusting. It was like the worst. It was honestly the worst month of my life, I have to say, in November 2020. And I just thought, this is my cue to leave. Like, this is my cue to exit. Like, I'm fucking done. It's going, go. You can't go with your dog, which was really sad because it was meant to be the two of us. Your body's telling you that it's being reactive and it just doesn't want to be here anymore. Fucking go. So I finally did pack up my life. And in December, I went back up to Queensland and I spent 2 months moving between the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. And again, feeling out where I really wanted to live. I have a really established friend circle in the Gold Coast. I've got a lot of friends there and I do really love it there. But I prefer the Sunshine Coast lifestyle. I prefer the slower pace. I prefer the beaches. I prefer that it's a bit like Sleepy Hollow, like a little beach town, but bigger. And I just kind of wanted the experience of going somewhere completely new and where I knew nobody. And honestly, for whatever reason, I just feel much more spiritually connected here. So I'm glad that I decided to come here. So January 21 was the official move where all my shit came up. I'd had it in storage for a couple of months and everything got moved up. And I rented a little apartment and it was absolutely fucking awesome. So moving to the Sunshine Coast really wasn't just changing postcodes. It was choosing to become a beginner again at almost 31 years old. In my birth town, I was somebody. I was established. I had history. I had big connections. I had a reputation. I had friends. I had relationships. I had everything. And on the Sunshine Coast, I was just a fish in the ocean. I was nobody and I was just another face. Just another person who decided to make the move up north. Something that I really didn't expect, and I think that a lot of people skim over this or perhaps don't highlight it either, is that the loneliness hit really different than what I expected. And this wasn't like backpacker travel loneliness where everybody's in the same boat and everybody just has an off day where they just need to call home. But this was like adult loneliness, trying to make friends in your 30s when everybody already has their established friend circles that they've known forever. Also the fact I work from home. I don't get to get up and go into a workplace where I am immersed with other people and I get to be around other people. That made it even more intense because I'm like, God, how am I going to get out and meet people? And like some days the only person I'd speak to was someone I pass on a river walk. So 6 months in, I nearly cracked. The homesickness become physical. It was like a weight on my chest. My anxiety was an all-time high. My fertility issues were flared. Every phone call to my friends made me question why I was putting myself through what I was putting myself through. Like my old life was still there waiting. The business, I still had my barbershop at this stage. My friends, my team, my familiarity, everything, I could just go back. That was always my thing when I was willing myself to move. It's like, well, if I hated it, I could always move back. And at that 6 month point, I really did consider it seriously, but by staying, by sitting in the pain, by sitting in the fear, by sitting in the uncomfortableness of it all, the moving away, like the hardest part isn't leaving, it's staying gone when it gets really hard. That's the hardest bit. And it's choosing the discomfort of growth over the comfort of the familiar. It's sitting in that and feeling into that and working through that. Because I feel now, honestly, I feel that I could move anywhere in the world and I could adapt. And there's something really cool about that too. If we ever decide that we want to pack up and move, we can just go. We'd be fine. We'd adapt. We'd find ourselves. And I think if I hadn't done this alone, I say we because my husband lives here now. He came up 2 years later. He moved up here for me. But I think doing it on my own was especially powerful and I loved it. And sticking it out taught me what I had lady balls, which is like the audacity to bet on myself in a place where I had no safety net, where I knew nobody, where I was discovering myself again. And when I was not performing for an audience that's known me my whole life, I realized too how much of my personality was actually just adapted behavior from my environment. When you move, you get to consciously choose which parts of you to keep and like which parts you want to leave behind. My businesses thrived because I was no longer operating from the limited worldview of a small town. My traveling, my moving, my discomfort, they all expanded what I guess I had limiting beliefs around was possible. So it only took me a few months to find a beautiful friend circle who I still love and adore so much. Shout out, gals. By putting myself out there, it was a lot. Going places alone was a lot. Learning to just join things and do activities and go out to little cafes and bars and stuff and just chill there by yourself is a lot. As extroverted as I am, that's not my style at all. I'm definitely not that kind of person. But 5 years later, I'm living my best life with my husband, like I said. And honestly, you couldn't pay me to move back to Victoria. You just couldn't. Sorry, not sorry. So recently, Cam and I moved into a new house that we built, and we both had just mountains of stuff in storage that had moved from where we grew up, then had just been chucked in the storage unit. And that was because we previously lived in an apartment. And I bought this apartment, would be 4 years ago, actually, this month, which is crazy. Actually, 4 years ago yesterday. That's amazing. So when we're going through all this stuff in the garage, and it's like all this childhood shit, like all this junk that my parents sent up that they didn't want anymore, which is fine. But how do I put this? It's like true what they say about manifestation, and like not in the woo-woo way people sometimes package it, but I was going through this box of like all these like drawings and like weird things that I did as a kid, and I found a letter and a drawing that I did when I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. And I had described my dream life of living in a big resort with a pool, and not a house with a pool, specifically a resort. We had been on, I remember this so vividly, and it's crazy that it didn't come up until we moved again, but like we'd been on a family holiday to this place called Diamond Resort, I think it was, in the Gold Coast of all places, which is really cool. And it was like a resort, and there was all these towers, which obviously you stayed in, which was accommodation. And I remember being down at the pool, and I'm like a kid, right? I'm little. And I remember talking to someone who lived there, who was saying, yeah, like I live here in this resort, like people live here too. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I want to live in a place like this with the sun and the palm trees and the lagoon pool and the beautiful life that I always saw in Queensland. And I guess that's where this whole thing started. And my apartment that I bought was wasn't beautiful when I bought it. It was beautiful when I left it, but it was a 2-bedroom apartment. There was, I was on the 6th floor. There was 2 massive towers, bigger than probably the resort that we stayed at when we were kids. But it had a big lagoon style pool. It had a lap pool, had a jacuzzi, had all the things, had all the palm trees, had all the trimmings, literally everything that I had remembered from when I was a child. And when you're a kid in a cold, windy city, writing about living in a resort, you're not being practical. You have no limiting beliefs. You have no ego. You're just writing about what it is that you want. And you're not limiting yourself to what seems like achievable. You're just declaring what would make you happy. And maybe that's like the real magic of manifestation, is not that the universe conspires to give you what you want, but somewhere deep down, you carry those pure desires with you. They become part of your eternal compass. They influence all the little decisions that you've made throughout your life over decades, over a lifetime. The travel, the risks, the staying, the leaving, the everything, the businesses, the whatever. They were all just like little stepping stones to the resort with the pool. The little girl in the country had somehow, I guess, always known it was going to be waiting for her eventually. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks when I found that, because I thought, shit, I did the thing. I did it. I did what I thought I wanted. And I loved living in that apartment. I'm definitely happy to be in a house now. We've got 2 big dogs, and there's 2 adults, and hopefully we'll have some kids here soon. But I don't think an apartment would have been that practical for that. But I needed that. That was my life that I needed. And I created it, but completely subconsciously, completely unconsciously, which is pretty cool. Anyways, just thought I would throw that in there, that sometimes we don't realize that every little thing that we're doing and every halt or every break in the plans or every whatever is actually getting us to exactly where we need to be and exactly what we want. So trust it, believe in your divine timing, and just go with it. Anyway, anyone who's listening here, I'm not saying that you have to move permanently, but you need to leave, even if it's just for 6 months, even if it's terrifying. Actually, especially if it's terrifying, I believe everybody should do the terrifying thing in safe environments. The person that you'll become on the other side of the discomfort is sitting there waiting for you, and you'll never meet them if you're just spending your whole life in your birth town and never exploring. Your comfort zone isn't protecting you, it's preventing you. You hear people talk a lot about the glass ceiling and, you're hitting the glass ceiling, and it can do that for a lot of people. Like, you're not a tree. You're not rooted into the ground. Go. Spread your wings, fly, leave, go do things, go see things, go and be. And look, you might get homesick. You might cry into your pillow at some random city where nobody knows your name. You might question everything. And I definitely did too. And that's kind of the point. Because when you finally create the life you love, whether that's where you originated or somewhere entirely new, it's because you choose it. It's because it's choosing you and it's what you're meant to be doing. And look, I didn't have parents that supported me moving out or traveling or anything of the sort. Every time I did anything like that, it was a fucking fight. Every conversation about leaving was met with a masterclass in gaslighting of like, why would you want to leave? Everything you need is here, but it's so nice here. But like, it's not going to be any different, or you're going to miss everybody or something like that. But I've come to understand a few things about why this happens, and this has come with 12 years of therapy, and why so many of us experience the same resistance from the people who claim to love us the most. Parents often confuse proximity with love. They've built their entire identity around being needed, around being the center of your universe. And when you announce that you're leaving, you're not just changing your address. You're fundamentally challenging their role in your life. You're saying, I can exist without you. And for parents who've never interrogated their own choices, this feels like rejection. There's also something deeper and I guess more insidious happening, which is many of our parents that never left their own birth towns, or if they did, they came back, or they came back probably quickly too. When you choose differently, you're holding up a mirror to people's choices, okay? Your adventure becomes an indictment of their safety. Your courage highlights their fear. It's kind of easier to convince you that leaving is wrong than to confront the possibility that they might have wanted something different for themselves, because that probably hurts them. I know for a fact I didn't want to date certain people or enter any relationships or anything when I was at home, because I was like, if I stay in this hometown and I stay for you, I'm going to fucking hate you down the track. And I feel like a lot of parents who have made the decision to not move, or maybe they made the decision to have children, or maybe they made the decision to stay in their town when they wanted to do other things, when they see their own children experiencing that, it can be very confronting. And I know that's definitely true of my experience. And look, the gaslighting can often come across as helpful, even loving sometimes, especially if you've dealt with it your whole life. I just want what's best for you. But what they really mean is, I want you to want what makes me comfortable. They'll list every possible thing that can go wrong. One of my parents even wrote me a cons list and sat down and lectured me about leaving. They'll also do things like reminding you of who's left and failed and come back. They'll suddenly become experts in the job market in cities they've never lived in, cost of living in places they've never researched, the loneliness of a life they've never even tried because they've always been codependent. And what they won't ever express, because God forbid some parents can show any slight bit of humility or, weakness, for probably is the way they see it, they won't tell you it because they're terrified. They won't show any, vulnerability, because they see it as weakness. And they're terrified, not for you, but of you, of the version of you that doesn't need their approval, of the possibility that they'll discover they were wrong about what life could be, of the chance that you'll build something bigger than what they settled for. The cruelest part of all of this is how much these little inadvertent things make you doubt yourself. And this is a big reason I do what I do, right? I want to help people through this shit because I'm going through it. I've been through it, right? When the people who raised you are telling you that you're making a mistake, it's hard to trust your own instincts, because for so much of our life, we leaned on them. They didn't allow us to think for themselves. They didn't encourage us to think for themselves. And so you start wondering if they see something that you don't. You begin listing all the reasons that they might be right. And you keep doing that confirmation bias thing for your ego, right? But here's what I learned 6 months into moving, homesick, questioning everything. The voice telling me to go back wasn't actually mine. It was theirs, internalized after years of being told that staying small and staying put was staying safe. Parents do this because love and control get tangled up in families that have never known boundaries and don't like losing control. They mistake keeping you close for keeping you safe, and they confuse your independence with abandonment. And sometimes, heartbreakingly, they simply can't imagine that their child might need something different than what they needed. And look, disappointing your parents might be the most loving thing you can do. I'm an expert at disappointing mine. But for both of you, it's a positive. It shows them you're strong enough to live your own life. It proves that you're a capable, independent adult despite them caging you shackling you, holding you down. And eventually, if they can move past their fear, they might even be proud of the person you become when you stop telling them you need permission to grow. And so that was heavy, but I needed to get that out because I know a lot of people don't move because of these reasons. I stayed a lot longer than I should have because of that exact reason. I need to be clear about something else too. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for everything that my birth town in regional Victoria gave me. And I can see why people love it there. It's a beautiful town. It's got a lot going on. The foundation it built, the values it instilled in me, the community that shaped me in those, especially in those formative years, the horrible school that I went to that was awful, that showed me all the things that I don't want. Those roots run really deep and they're a part of who I am. And the safety of knowing every part of that town and the simplicity of being connected to everybody and the predictability that let me dream big dreams from a secure base, like they weren't small gifts. You can be grateful for where you came from while being even more grateful for where you chose to go. My birth town gave me roots, but beautiful, tropical, sunny, gorgeous Queensland gave me my wings. And if I'm honest, the life I've built here feeds my soul in ways that staying could never have achieved. Back home gave me stability and my new life gives me possibility. Back home gave me history. Here gives me freedom to write new stories. The birth town provided the comfort and this life provides growth. It showed me one way to live well, but the coast shows me daily that there are infinite ways to design a meaningful life. My whole life has fallen into place since living here. I met the man of my dreams. I have 2 awesome little doggies, a beautiful house, beautiful friends. My business has flourished. My business has grown tenfold. And I'm really grateful that my birth town really did give me something solid to launch from. But I'm even more grateful that I launched. And the view from where I landed, it just makes like every moment of uncertainty and pain and everything else worth it. My birth town gave me a life, but my new home gave me my life. And the distinction makes all the difference. I really hope this resonated with you, and I hope if you've been thinking about moving, maybe this is the push you need to make that big leap, and I promise you what comes out of you on the other side is going to be 150% worth it. So thanks for listening today, guys. Have a beautiful day.